Good morning, everyone, and thank you for joining our webinar this morning with RSD as we look at our new offering, ZTrim Operations Analytics. I'd like to give you a little bit of background about RSD. We have been in the software business for over 40 years, and we have a global presence. We have customers across the globe. And one of our focuses has been on the mainframe. We also have distributed systems, software platforms available. With ZTrim Operations Analytics, this is actually the result of over 2 years of research and development, not only internally, but with external partners who are mainframe experts. So we're excited today to present to you ZTrim Operations Analytics and demonstrate to you not only the product, but the value that it can bring with the dynamic changes that are happening across IT in many mainframe platform organizations that have mainframe platform. One of the focuses that we'd like to talk about today is really how to optimize your mainframe spend. There's a lot of attention and ongoing attention in organizations on how to optimize their mainframe spending. And we want to demonstrate how ZTrim Operations Analytics can help you with that spending model, not only with optimization, but cost savings, providing easy insight into your consumption at various levels from LPAR, Sysplex, application, workload, and just various views that are available with ZTrim Operations Analytics. I'm excited to be able to present this to you today along with Mark Perillo. We are both technical account managers at RSD, and we help manage accounts that are using our products today and help them with their technology. So Mark, welcome, and let's get started.
Okay.
Today's agenda will focus on mainframe modernization and optimization, have a discussion about some of the trends and things that we're seeing as we talk to customers and the results of some surveys that we've done. We'll look at ZTrim Operations Analytics and also the Operations Analytics technology overall and have kind of some discussions about that and look at some of the trends with that technology as well. And then we will actually be providing a live demo of the product. Mark will do the demo today, and we'll be interacting with the product the way that end users actually in your organization would use the product. What we've done today is as we do the demo, we'll look at kind of 4 role-based, what I call role-based stakeholder positions within organizations. So we'll provide a view of different dashboards within ZTrim, and these dashboards are very specific to specific roles. So we'll look at kind of a higher level director. So this would be a director of an organization and the types of information that they would want to see from the mainframe and some of the views that they would like to see. And we'll demonstrate that dashboard. And then business and IT application manager and some of the specific things that they would like to see and how we can customize ZTrim very easily and quickly so that not only can they see immediately the things that they are interested in, but they can interact with the data dynamically and drill down and gather additional detailed information. Then the IT operations manager, obviously that is a very specific view, a little bit more point in time. They want to be able to see, what's been happening recently and what do I need to be planning for, in the next cycle, the next processes, those kinds of things. And then finally, IT performance and capacity management. And we'll look at these very different views of the dashboards, some of the things that they have in common, and some of the reasons why you can use ZTrim effectively to customize the dashboards for these specific stakeholder audiences within your organization. So what's going on about in the mainframe space? As we all know, in IT is a very dynamic part of the business, constantly changing. The mainframe is no different. There are not only changes within the platform itself, but how the platform is handled and managed. So we have some really interesting statistics that we're hearing and that are results of surveys as we work with customers. Overall, worldwide, 70% of corporate data still resides on the mainframe. So there is a huge footprint of data, and this is critical business data for organizations across the globe. It is a critical component of most IT infrastructures, yet at the same time, it tends to be hard to access. There's little visibility or insight into what's really going on the mainframe. People understand that it is a significant cost in many organizations. They don't really understand what is contributing to that cost, and certainly not at a detailed level. They kind of view it as this ominous black box, if you would, that's kind of managed in a more reactive mode. It's difficult not only to manage many times without the information in a proactive mode, and it's difficult many times to also make critical business plans and align them with business strategies effectively with data from the mainframe. The data just doesn't seem to be available in many organizations. Some of the market trends, this really has to do with infrastructure itself and then also the actual support of the various platforms. So what we find is across organizations, non-critical applications, and sometimes even more critical applications are being transferred from the mainframe to distributed platforms. What is interesting about some of those trends, we kind of see this going back and forth, but what's interesting about some of those trends when you have conversations is, well, how did you make the decision, on what to move? And, how did this align with your overall business strategy? And that's when people kind of start to reveal that they didn't have a lot of good data. It was just their instinct or, their intuition. They didn't have necessarily a lot of good empirical data to make these decisions and contribute to these decisions. So that's really interesting because it's not a typical business model, right? What ZTRM is all about is providing that information so you can make these critical decisions effectively and easily across your organization. Mainframe environments and support, as we all know, they're often being consolidated, and during those consolidations, there are various sourcing models. Gartner talks about different sourcing models constantly, and there are some pretty good articles out there about, ideas about how you can try to make these sourcing models more effective because they're always a challenge. But the fact is that in the mainframe environment, there's consolidation constantly happening, and then the sourcing model is constantly changing, often outsourced, which kind of provides or introduces an additional layer of complexity into the model. And then, of course, there's availability of skilled mainframe personnel. The people that have the skills are oftentimes retiring, and there is just a smaller set of people that have those skills that can come along and replace those skilled personnel. So that is a challenge that many organizations, their leadership is beginning to see and trying to address. And in fact, many organizations that are conference organizations and organizations such as SHARE are trying to address these issues as well with mentoring and things like that, programs that will help address this personnel issue. There are other challenges as well when we talk about specific operations analytics and the reporting and the creation of those reports. Organizations tell us consistently that the reports are complex and they require high levels of specific expertise to be able to create the reports. So this is very interesting considering some of the trends that we just talked about as far as skill sets. Then there are also significant delays. Many times there are many hours, sometimes days, between the actual events and when the information is available. So this delay creates significant gaps in the decision-making processes as well, especially when you're looking at some of the dashboards that we'll be looking at today. For instance, the operations manager, they don't want a 2-day gap in the information that they're looking at. The performance and capacity people, they want a quicker view as well. They want more recent data so that they can do some trends, both short-term and long-term. So when there are these delays, obviously they don't have access to the types of data for the time frames that they need. And then finally, what we find is that there as much as 15% of mainframe consumption, so therefore contributing to the cost of the mainframe, is actually can be attributed directly to non-critical business applications. If you had the information, what decisions would you make about those non-critical business applications and where they're running? Perhaps maybe where they're running within your processing windows, or even would you make different decisions about what platform you would have those applications running on? What we would propose to you this time for a change, and we think that ZTRM Operations Analytics is that change. The stakeholders in your organization, regardless of what line of the business that they're in, whether they're technical in the IT organization or managerial in the IT organization, or actually on the business side, the stakeholders need visibility into this information so that they can have a common view and have common conversations around business issues and business strategies and plans. They need easy access to real-time and understandable data. Providing the data is one thing, but is it data that your stakeholders can digest and actually understand and brings value to the things that they're trying to do and the things that they're trying to accomplish? And then finally, there is continued pressure for cost optimization, and one of the key aspects of that cost optimization is to provide funding to accelerate modernization initiatives around digitization and other IT initiatives to move the business forward. These are the things that stakeholders are talking about, and these are the things that IT needs to rise up to the challenge and be able to provide them the information that they need. As we discussed in the agenda, one of the things we wanted to look at are various solutions that are available in the market. So ZTRM is new to the market, but we think that we have something pretty special. So current market solution challenges is, first of all, most solutions contribute directly to the MSU consumption. So we're talking about consumption here. And really what this is about is what does it cost the business, because there's a direct relationship between MSU and cost to the business. Most solutions for operations analytics directly contribute to additional MSU consumption. So not only do you have the cost of the software, the cost of the personnel, but you also have the added cost directly impacting MLC costs, perhaps for even other products, depending on how the agreements are written. The other solution can be complex and time-consuming. Here you can see in this chart that if you just to create a new dashboard, let's say you have a stakeholder that wants a particular view or a particular set of reports, very time-consuming in these other solutions. Whereas in ZTRM, it literally, we can demonstrate to you that it takes literally a few clicks to interact with the data and build a customized dashboard for a particular stakeholder. Then there comes the time commitment. And then by this, what we're talking about is the time to actually create the reports. Most organizations have a set of standard reports that they're creating today. And in most organizations that we've talked to, the minimum time that it takes for somebody to create those current standard reports is a 40-hour work week. 40 hours once a month for the monthly reports. That's 12 weeks of a resource where you could allocate that resource's time. And many of these people have very specific skill sets that could be beneficial to the organization in other areas. That's 12 weeks of time that this person could be working on other things directly, that would benefit the organization in significant ways. And then there's the cost as well. Most of the solutions in the market today, frankly, typically is what happens is there's not a single solution. You have to put together several pieces of software, which ramps up the cost really quickly. And several of the solutions also have a consumption model, meaning that the more volume of data that you store, the cost increased because it's a consumption model based on the amount of data that you store. How do you start the modernization process? RSD's belief is that any modernization initiative starts with shared and simple understanding between business partners and business stakeholders. Really, that's what this is all about. It's all about the conversation and having a meaningful discussion so that you can align what's happening in your IT infrastructure with what the business priorities are and what the business strategies and plans are. Regarding mainframe modernization, recently we had the opportunity to partner with Gartner, and we were able to publish an article along with a research note by Thomas Klinek. It's really an interesting article about modernization. And in that research, Thomas talks about several different ideas as far as modernization, whether it's talking about reviewing contracts and things like that. But there are two key areas that he talks about. One of them is application rationalization. And what he means by application rationalization really is having the information available so that you can rationalize your application portfolio and align it to the business. In many organizations, they just don't have the information to do that effectively. And our position is that ZTRM Operations Analytics will help you do that effectively so that you can align your application portfolio with business processes and therefore have more meaningful discussions between IT, business leaders, and decision makers. And then finally, that alignment with the business. And by this, we mean alignment with business strategies. When you talk about either rationalization or, is the business interested in cost optimization or are they interested in modernization, you can use the information that's available in ZTRM Operations Analytics and drive the initiatives so that you can move down the path to cost optimization if that's what the focus is, or even modernization where you can look at opportunities for savings and allocate those savings to business initiatives that are associated with modernization. Results, right? That's really what business is all about, and that's really what this conversation is really all about. We have organizations today using ZTRM that are in the insurance sector, financial institutions that are in various areas of financial, whether it's investment, financial management, or banking, and then also state agencies that are taking advantage of ZTRM Operations Analytics. In Europe, as I mentioned before, we're a global company. In Europe, the focus has been on banking. We have some really great relationships with various banks. And in fact, some of the development that's associated with ZTRM over this last 2 years was done in association with some key experts that are in the banking area. Measurable outcomes. We propose that we will demonstrate that the savings that we can show with ZTRM Operation Analytics, those savings opportunities that will be revealed with the information, and there will be a 300% ROI in 9 months. So the cost of acquiring ZTRM will pay for itself 300 times over. That's quite an ROI and bold claim, but we're comfortable with making that claim. We can do a 1-hour demo with your data. This is something that we'll talk about a little bit later in the presentation. We can do a 1-hour demo using your data that is very compelling. And we can show in your organization, using your data, how ZTRM Operation Analytics will bring value to the decision-making process in your organization. With ZTRM, the way it's configured, and we'll talk about the configuration here in a couple of minutes, 1-day implementation, and you'll be using the product. We can implement it in 1 day, put the components together, have you begin ingesting data, and do some training, and you'll be up and using ZTRM. We are using a yearly subscription model for the pricing, and it's priced per CPC. So for your physical mainframe machine, that's the price. It's priced just for physical machine. We don't care how many LPARs are running on that machine, none of those kinds of things. You can gather the SMF records from those and ingest them into your zTrim instance. zTrim Operations Analytics, really in the development of the product, we tried to focus on three things. Communication. We really see zTrim Operations Analytics not only as a technical solution for the IT organization, but it's really a communication and a collaboration tool for the organization. Can facilitate these discussions between your business, whether it's technical parts of the business or non-technical business leaders, so that they can have meaningful discussions about strategies and plans. It's easy to use. We'll show you with the web interface where you can interact with the data actively. It responds immediately. You can understand your data, but you can also easily drill down and gather additional detailed information as you're working with the data and as questions develop and you need those questions answered. Cost optimization. You have insight into your mainframe consumption and being able to control the mainframe cost and also make strategies and plans to either exploit it in a greater way or use it in a different way across your organization and align it to what your business strategies are, especially as business continue to focus on modernization initiatives. zTrim Operations Analytics really was designed for all users, and by that we mean technical, non-technical. It's literally a graphic visualization tool, very interactive. It is very powerful. You can build the dashboards in a few minutes for each specific stakeholder. You can build a custom dashboard for a special request and share it immediately with the person that's requesting the dashboard. They can interact with it. They can change it. They can look at it in different views. It's really a powerful tool. Easy and scalable. We're using open Elasticsearch doing the analytics, and I don't know what you know about Elasticsearch, but Elasticsearch is becoming more and more popular as a repository. It's built on the ELK stack. And if you want to learn more about Elasticsearch, I would encourage you to go out to YouTube. Just Google Elasticsearch at Verizon. There's a very compelling YouTube video there that was presented at a technical conference of what Verizon is doing with Elasticsearch, where they're storing 650 billion documents in their Elasticsearch repository. And it's a pretty impressive presentation, actually, where they talk about how they scaled that up. Some of the challenges, but how Elasticsearch was able to help them meet those challenges. And then finally, affordable. As I mentioned before, it's an affordable subscription model. It's based per CPC. And we feel like that this is the right way to offer zTrim Operations Analytics to the public. This is an overview of the architecture of zTrim Operations Analytics. So literally what we're doing is we're running on Linux. This can be run on a standalone Linux server, or it can be run on a VM Linux server. zTrim Operation Analytics, the components itself are all delivered as a package. So we have the ingester and then Elasticsearch embedded into that. And then the zTrim web interface is also included. Basically, the only thing that needs to happen within the mainframe side is you need to provide your SMF records, and we'll talk about the specific SMF records as well. It's a very limited set and subset of SMF records that we're using in zTrim Operations Analytics to provide this information. It's a transfer of the file, and you can schedule that transfer. You can use your SMF man files or log stream, and you can transfer them every hour on the hour, ingest them into zTrim Operations Analytics, and all the processing and all the grouping and indexing of the data is done on the Linux system. So it's done off platform, so it's not consuming any additional MSU. One of the things that we talked about were the specific stakeholders, and today we'll demonstrate. There are 4 different dashboards that we've built because we see these as pretty typical, but obviously you could have more than these depending on what the needs of the business were. So directors, it's more a high level, mid and long-term trends of consumption per business entities so that it can be broken down so that, for instance, if you're doing chargeback, you can kind of track that by the entity where you're doing your chargeback. And then you can see the top consumers across business entities, and then also monitoring of the R4H, the peak periods, which is what the MLC cost is based on, and you can see that those trends over time. And then we have a dashboard for the Business IT Application Manager where you can understand the consumption of applications, specific applications, and their impact on the peak and the impact on the cost. So as an application manager, you certainly would want to know how your applications are impacting the cost of consumption and the MLC cost. And then also aligning the mainframe resources to your business priorities and your applications. So there's that business alignment that we talked about earlier, where the IT application manager can very plainly see what's happening in the applications and then what's happening and align that with business strategies and business plans, or the things that are going on in the business. Perhaps it's growth and justification for growth in a particular area where you can justify, revenue expenditures associated with greater consumption because the business is bringing value and generating additional revenue for the business in a particular area. IT Operations Manager. So this is really about batch cutoffs, making sure that we're doing things based on our SLAs with the business, especially those critical morning processes and overnight processes. Analyzing the R4A peak so that you can see that per program, application, and workload, and identifying mainframe resource consumption for optimization opportunities. The Operations Manager is tasked many times with specific cost optimization initiatives, and that continues to be an ongoing trend in IT where there's pressure to reduce the cost of all of IT processes. And then the performance and capacity folks, right? They want to see those consumption trends, compare them to capacity, and make plans. Sometimes it's more immediate. What do we need to be doing tomorrow to allow for capacity? What do we need to be planning for projects to make sure that we're not exceeding capacity and we're paying penalties, things like that. But then also for longer term planning, what do we need to be planning for as far as infrastructure is concerned, our processors, the memory that's needed, all those kinds of things. They can gather this information and make informed decisions about those types of processes and acquisitions that they need to be planning for and making. So in summary, we have very specific KPIs that are built into ZTRM Operations Analytics, and these are already provided and available. And Mark will talk about those a little bit more. We're talking about MSU consumption and tracking that at various levels and being able to demonstrate very clearly what's going on in the mainframe system. Batch window cutoffs, very specific dashboards and meaningful dashboards for the organization. Dynamic and interactive navigation and simulations so that the users can actually interact with the data. Not only are you providing the data, but they can actually interact with it and analyze it in various ways. We're collecting SMF 30, 70, 72, and 89 records. And as I mentioned before, you can basically process these hourly and ingest them in the ZTRM system. And we are off-platform. We're not contributing to MSU consumption. And now, Mark, I'll turn it over to you for the demo. And if you have questions, we do have a chat available in the WebEx. So you're welcome to put any questions in the WebEx that you might have.
Thank you, Craig. I'm just going to take a second here to get everything organized. I have to switch. Okay. everyone should be seeing the IT Director dashboard, so let me start. Welcome to our ZTrim Operations Analytics demo. It's my privilege to perform this demo for you using my laptop environment. ZTrim leverages Elasticsearch, as Craig mentioned, extremely scalable technology. Customers do live analytics with more than 650 billion documents with acceptable results. The other side of that is ZTrim is also a lean system that can easily adapt to more modest configurations. For example, my ZTrim server is running on a VirtualBox Linux machine with 2 cores and 8 gigs of RAM. And it's a lean system, but it's more than adequate for running ZTrim analytics and using it for our demo. So the resulting display that we have in the browser right now is the default launch page for ZTrim Operations Analytics. This default dashboard that's displayed is the IT Director dashboard. So we can see up here in the title. Role-based dashboards are an out-of-the-box feature of ZTrim. The strength of ZTrim Operations Analytics is the ability to provide meaningful KPIs for all the stakeholders in your company. Technical and non-technical teams or individuals are equipped with role-based dashboards that are customized to provide substantive insights into your mainframe resource consumption. These dashboards feature KPIs, key performance indicators, which are defined with default values for filters, time ranges, and analyze parameters, as we'll see going forward, to meet your needs. The standard dashboards can be customized to fit your needs, but we use the parameters that tend to make sense looking at the different data. We're going to use the defaults to start. This will make things very consistent, and it's a great starting point to understand. The provided dashboards I will focus upon are the IT Director dashboard that we're currently on, the Business IT Application Managers dashboard, the IT Operations Managers dashboard, and the IT Performance Capacity Managers dashboard. So starting with the IT Director dashboard, this gives a high-level view of the systems and allows the IT Director to understand his mainframe consumption. It's focusing on the past 30 days or on the year's view, and the intent is to give a summary view of systems consumption. It tracks the rolling 4-hour average and the cost 20 KPI, this first one, for the month by peak for the entire environment. He's only interested in the real MSU usage for the period and wants to identify trends and directions using this report. For me 1 second, I have to scroll down. He has another cost 20 KPI, which is looking at the rolling 4-hour average peaks by entity, which provides the MSU consumption for his different lines of business. We'll see here that he's broken his systems into a commercial entity. We're seeing the green, financial in the orange, red, and blue in the personal. Those are different lines of business in the company, and he gives him a high-level view of how they all contribute to the peaks. He also has a cost 11 KPI, which shows the R4H analysis per report class. This is very important just to get the system profile by the WM report classes. Additionally, as we get into more features in ZTrim that can do report classes, it may be important for chargeback going forward. Okay, now we're actually looking at MSU usage for about a year's period, 13 months. And this is the Kappa 10 KPI, which looks at total MSU consumption by month for the past 13 months by entity, to give a practical summary of MSU consumption by the different lines of business. As we can see here, the lines themselves kind of have a similar pattern of usage. That gives him a view across his entire environment. The last two KPIs here. The first, the Prof 20 KPI, shows the breakdown of the recent contributors to the MSU consumption. And we see the contributions by batch workloads, other, which in our case is mostly DB2, and teleprocessing in our environment is KICS. And then we have a Prof 31 KPI, which is showing the top consumers. On this particular KPI is showing some features with mapping, which we're going to actually cover in the next dashboard where we have more examples. So we're going to move on to the next dashboard at this point, which is the Business IT Application Manager's dashboard. And one thing we're going to see with the dashboards is we're going to see some KPIs that we saw in the previous ones, because a lot of times you need to have the same view of a particular resource that another person does, so you can have a conversation and both have a common basis. The Business IT Application Manager needs to understand the impact of his applications to the total MSU consumption and to align the allocated resources to his business priorities. His dashboard starts with the same two cost 20 KPIs, the rolling 4-hour average peaks, that we saw in the original IT Director dashboard. So both of these are the same as the previous one. Coming down next, we have a cost 15 R4H analysis by application, and this gives us a consumption for all applications that were mapped and assigned in Z-Trim mappings. And this is followed by a Prof 31 KPI, which has the application consumers defined. And this is the perfect time to take a brief look at mappings in general. So in the upper right of the display, we have settings. So we'll set a setting page. I'm going to select mappings. And we see that we have different objects that we can map within Z-Trim. One is a workload type, where we can take different groups of workload as defined in WLM and give them a type that we can use in our different KPIs. We have mappings. These workload type mappings are used in the Prof 32 and the Prof 20. We have entity, which we see mostly in the cost 20.
So Mark, this would be an example really of like maybe a banking or a financial, right?
Yes, exactly.
A financial organization, right? That's why they would have those particular entities.
Right. They're heavily a kick shop. And if you look at the online profile, you can see the online banking. And then we have the actual boxes that are part of the environment under the CPCs. And then the actual applications that are running, a lot of the jobs that account for the different resource allocations in the job. Like I said, our test sample, as we can see going through the documentation, as Craig said, is that our sample is based on a banking application. So this is the underlying structure that's providing the information when we see our resource mapping and the different cost models for the R4H. It's all defined here by somebody that understands the programs in your environment. So now we're going to actually go back to the dashboard. Okay, I'm going to get my mouse back here. And now if we scroll down, we'll see that these different applications that are defined, we're using the prefix for the application name, are here on the cost 15. Just putting the mouse over that field, we can see their contribution in the allocation. Also, we can selectively exclude a workload, and this will show us the resources that are, say, the MSUs that are not being used, what the potential savings may be if this workload is moved somewhere else. We can also flip the display to see just what this workload itself is contributing. So you have a lot of capability and flexibility, and everything is dynamic. So as Craig said earlier, you can drill down, look for specific patterns and contributors to the rolling 4-hour average, because this high peak in the rolling 4-hour average determines your monthly bill. Any workload that you can exclude or otherwise reschedule to occur at a different time can lower your costs. And
Mark, would this be a typical day view that an application manager, for instance, would want to see? Would they see, because I noticed that it's just This is just for the last 2 days, right? November 14th and 15th.
And applications are usually just looking to see if this is a common pattern. They usually go 2 days just so they have something to refer
Okay.
back to. But this is fairly typical for an online environment with the applications. You'll see it when we look at the breakdown for batch and teleprocessing. It's a pretty common curve where you see different workloads actually becoming more active at different times, and the peaks happening when you get a few workloads that are ramping up and other ones aren't ramping down. So looking at the peaks here, you see all these 3 large applications all busy at the same time. And this is where earlier Craig was talking about people try to move workloads and they use it intuitively. Intuition works 90% of the time. That other 10% can be a killer. A tool like this can give you 99% confidence in what you're looking at and what the contributors are to your existing environment and give you a comfort factor moving forward. Now we've got the cost 15 and the prof 31 side by side because they complement each other with the data that they're looking at for the application manager. The same is the case down here for the cost 12, which is giving us the analysis by program category. And then the prof 30, which shows us the breakdown there. Now one nice thing about the program categories, you can put multiple programs into the same component so that you don't have 10 entries for EOS batch, you just have the one. This allows you to kind of build your workloads in a way that you can effectively say, here's the amount of resources that EOS is using throughout my day. Or if we go back and say, how big of an impact is TDS having on my environment where MIPS are being used on my mainframe to do operations analytics? Or is KICS really the big workload that's a big contributor to my peaks? Well, obviously it is. And this scale is great when you're excluding or including workloads, but if you want a better view, you can just exclude that and let it open up a little more.
Mark, just as an example where the value is here, you and I were in a discussion with a customer where they had indicated they had optimized KICS and they'd done a significant project to do that. When it was at KICS or DB2, and then they said when we showed this, we showed that that was not a significant consumer in their environment, and they asked the question, well, would our time have been spent better somewhere else? And it's like, well, maybe it would, because that would have been, doing something else might have been more effective in the overall consumption.
Absolutely. In that case, it was KICS. It was heavily an IMS shop. They had one little
that's what it was,
that did nothing, and it turns out it wasn't even contributing at the peak. In our case here, that's a good point. What I noticed with our demo data is that even though DB2 is contributing at the peaks, probably because of the KICS usage, it's not really a big contributor. So optimizing DB2 may be a good thing to do going forward. It may help KICS performance. But for the rolling 4-hour average, for the savings that we want to get by moving workloads and timing things better, it's not really a big hitter, which is kind of surprising. Sometimes you just assume it is. In shops that have a lot of batch workload with database maintenance and all, this becomes a big deal usually at the start of the day. So it can vary. Once again, 90% of the time your intuition is spot on. The other 10% can be a killer. And finally, at the very bottom of this IT Application Manager's dashboard, we just have a breakdown for the contributors in a pie chart. And you'll see that in this particular case, our biggest single contributor overall is batch. Even though the peaks occur more with the teleprocessing environment, the biggest resource consumer across the day is batch. But that the KICS is also significant. The other includes a lot of other system maintenance and the DB2 in this case. Okay, we're going to start getting to the point now where these remaining dashboards, we're going to have a lot of duplication. So we're just going to do if we've already seen a KPI, we're going to just kind of go a little quickly. Otherwise, we'll spend a little more time. So it's one of my favorite dashboards. Next is the IT Operation Manager's dashboard. because this guy is in the nerve center, and he's really worried about what happened yesterday and what's happening now. He's really focused on the daily process. His world is very much present in previous day activities. And he starts off with this EFF 30 KPI, which is cutoff compliance for yesterday. As Craig was saying, it's really important because if SLAs aren't met, that's real money that's usually hitting the budget for IT. He's getting a summary here of all cutoff compliance events for his environment. And the summary is providing this information by CPC, Sysplex, Entity, and LPAR, because they have license agreements for all these entities. And if you note here, under the end of backups, one of the backups ended after like 5 minutes late. Since that's a violation, it shows up in red. But since it wasn't really contributing to any kind of an outage or anything else, the status came up as normal. Okay, so that's his first big view. And he's the only guy who has this on his dashboard. And that's followed by the cost 20 KPI showing the peaks for the months. And we've seen this before. A lot of business and the IT director had this view, just to remind them where the peaks are going. The third KPI is the cost 10, showing the analysis, but by Sysplex, which is kind of interesting. Operations is one of the places that really monitors Sysplex resource consumption, because at the system support level, a lot of the resources are defined and allocated at the Sysplex level. So this is a KPI that would probably benefit him very well. In addition to that, they also get involved with the performance people, and one of the things that they often talk about are the R4H by resource types. So they're looking specifically at the batch, teleprocessing, and other processing that may be happening on the system. And once again, when we look at the peak, we see that teleprocessing is a big contributor. But if you look at the overall day, you see that batch is still the biggest consumer. And this KPI is backed up by the Prof 32, as we saw before. So you get the detail, and then you get the raw data behind it. Okay, the sixth KPI in this dashboard is the cost 12 R4H analysis, which is giving us the program category. So you get the grouping for the program products. And we have the Prof 30 showing the program categories that were assigned. You see the mapping as well. And as we said, our biggest contributor during the online day for the peak is KICS, but the biggest resource consumption is really our batch processing. If we look at all the other, which isn't really showing up here. These are our onlines. So these are our online systems that are giving us the view. We see OS is not a big contributor, nor a view. TDS is big on certain parts of batch. The KICS DB2 environment shows up here. It's my bad on that, talking about batch in the wrong category. And here's the Prof 30 that's giving us a breakdown here as well. Okay, the last two KPIs that we're going to see here are the cost 15, which is the R4H analysis by application. And we can see here that probably our biggest contributors are these BL applications, this IC, not as much. Excluding him, all these together, if we exclude them, and then flip, so they're the only ones that we show, we see it's a contributor. And if we exclude these three, here's the IC, which has some interesting presence at the peaks. His contributions kind of define the peak to a large extent. The other ones kind of fill it in. It's a very interesting and dynamic KPI when you start looking at the applications themselves. And then the Prof 31 shows a breakdown of the consumers and how they contribute. And the peaks at different times of the day and the resources at different times of the day They make it look like they're very evenly meted out over the day, but the time periods with the R4H changes significantly. Once again, these are all dynamic as we were showing. They change as we go along, and you can change any of these parameters, how you analyze, and do a save, and you're ready for next time. For example, we made 2 changes in here that we're just going to discard. And last but not least, we're going to finish with the IT Performance Capacity Managers dashboard. And this rounds out the dashboards for ZTrim, and this stakeholder is obsessed with the rolling 4-hour average across all the KPIs, and he's trying to identify the contributors in the environment. And he's starting off with the same cost 20 and the kappa 10 KPIs that we saw previously. And these are really the only 2 KPIs where he's looking at the big picture. He's really focused on what's happening today or in the last few days. So we're going to start here with the cost 10. He's looking at the R4H analysis by the Sysplex, because it's another guy that's really sensitive to the Sysplex and its performance, along with the operations people. Additionally, he's also looking at workload types. He's working very closely with workload manager policies and wants to make sure that batch isn't peaking at the same time as the onlines, or the other processing is a subset that he can live with. Just wants to make sure these 2 KPIs complement each other and give him what he expects. We're then looking at the cost 12 rolling 4-hour average analysis by program category, followed by the Prof 30, which shows us how it lays down. We're doing multiple days here. This graph gets a little busy, but a lot of times with online systems in particular, you want to have at least a couple of days worth to see if today's an unusual day, or to see if you're approaching a pattern. So you're going to see the date actually down here on the bottom, but each one of these bars gives the time for this event. So you can easily go through and see if you're into a very high spike or pattern that's not the usual, something that might raise a couple of alarms. And here's the breakdown. And the same goes for the applications. We want to see the top consumers. We want to see it all go. And the breakdowns as well. And finishing up here, just showing these breakdowns a little bit on the charts. We can go with more and more granularity. What happens is if you get too many objects in here, this is going to get to a point where you're just trying to manage too much in the picture. A lot of times 20 or 30 is the best way to go when we get into looking at the detail. This graph doesn't do a lot for us, but that's why working with the data, sometimes you get results you don't expect. That's why when we load these KPIs with all the different filters and time ranges and how you want to analyze the data, we come up with defaults that make sense for the data that you're looking at. So going in, the reports make a lot of sense, and they're probably close to what you want to use for your shop. And that pretty much does it for our cursory overview of the role-based dashboards. Your customized dashboards will probably end up looking a little different for your stakeholders, but these give you a great starting point and reference if you want to start tweaking it and tuning it for your different areas. At this time, I'd like to return the presentation back to Craig, and we'll have time at the end of the webinar for any questions. And once again, thank you for attending. Craig, I'm going to flip back the slide.
Thanks, Mark. Yeah. Appreciate that. So are there any questions? We'll just open it up. You can submit your questions in the chat. In conclusion, what we'd like to ask is, do you know what is running on your mainframe? And do you understand the resource impact of each application that's running on your mainframe? And if you have cost optimization initiatives where you're trying to reduce consumption on your mainframe, what input and what data are you using to make those decisions? Those are the questions that we'd like to ask. So the next step really is what we would ask of you. Give us the opportunity to provide a demo, a little bit more extensive demo like Mark did today. And what's more compelling is contact us, and we'd be glad to demonstrate Z-Trim Operations Analytics. I've been doing EOS stuff for several days. Z-Trim Operations Analytics using your SMF records. So what we'd ask is provide us a 3 to 5 day subset of your SMF records, 30, 70, 72, and 89. And ideally, we would like to have this around your peak, and we can show you compelling presentation using your SMF records.